Victoria Ashford stood in her marble kitchen, phone pressed against her ear, trying to keep her voice calm. But inside she was panicking. The concert pianist she'd hired for tonight's dinner party had just canceled. Something about a family emergency. She glanced at the clock. Her guest would arrive in less than 2 hours. This cannot be happening, she muttered, ending the call. Victoria had built a tech empire worth billions. But right now she felt helpless over something as simple as background music for a dinner party. She was 58 years old and had hosted hundreds of these events. Politicians, celebrities, business moguls, they all came to her estate expecting perfection. And perfection was what she always delivered. Until now, her housekeeper, Rosa Martinez, was setting the dining table with fine china. Rosa had worked for Victoria for almost 15 years. She was quiet, efficient, and basically invisible to Victoria, just the way Victoria preferred her staff to be. "Rosa, do you know anyone who plays piano?" Victoria asked, more out of desperation than real hope. Rosa looked up, surprised to be spoken to so directly. "My son plays a little, Mrs. Ashford, but he's not professional or anything." Victoria barely registered the words. A son? Rosa had a son. She'd probably mentioned him before, but Victoria never paid attention to the personal lives of her employees. That wasn't her job. Can he play simple dinner music? Nothing fancy. Just background noise, really. Rosa hesitated. "I think so. He practices sometimes on the old piano in the staff quarters. But Mrs. Ashford, he's never played for an audience before." "He might be nervous, Ian, it's fine. I just need someone to fill the silence. Go get him." 20 minutes later, a teenage boy walked into the kitchen. He was 16, maybe 17, wearing worn jeans and a faded jacket. His dark hair was slightly messy, and he carried a backpack over one shoulder. He'd clearly been doing homework. "You must be Rosa's son," Victoria said, barely glancing at him. "What's your name again?" "Diego, ma'am." "Right, Diego, I need you to play piano tonight during dinner. Nothing complicated, just soft background music. Can you do that?" Diego shifted his weight nervously. "I can try. What kind of music do you want?" "I don't know, classical, jazz, whatever sounds elegant. My guest won't really be listening anyway. They'll be talking business. Just keep it quiet and pleasant." She could see the uncertainty in his eyes, but she didn't have time for his nervousness. She had 1,000 other things to worry about. The caterer was late. The flower arrangements looked wrong. One of her biggest investors was coming tonight, and she needed everything to be perfect. "You'll get paid, of course," Victoria added, as if that solved everything. $50 for the evening. That's fair, right? Diego nodded slowly. $50 was probably a lot of money to him. Rosa worked hard, but Victoria knew she didn't pay her much. Just standard market rate for household staff. "Good, be ready by 7. Wear something nice. And remember, quiet and in the background." As Diego left with his mother, Victoria had already forgotten about him. She was back on her phone, dealing with the caterer crisis. 2 hours later, her home was transformed. Candles flickered on every surface. The smell of expensive food drifted from the kitchen. Men in tailored suits and women in designer dresses filled her living room, champagne glasses in hand. Victoria moved through the crowd like a queen. This was her element. Power, money, influence. These people respected her. They hung on her every word. She'd worked her entire life to build this world, and she'd earned every bit of it, Victoria. "Darling, this is magnificent as always," said Patricia, a venture capitalist who managed billions in assets. "You're too kind," Victoria replied with a practiced smile. "Dinner will be served in 10 minutes. We're just waiting for the pianist to start." She glanced toward the foyer where her grand Steinway piano sat. It was a beautiful instrument, worth more than most people's cars. But honestly, Victoria couldn't even remember the last time anyone had played it. It was more decoration than anything else. Diego appeared from the hallway, looking uncomfortable in a borrowed white shirt that was slightly too big for him. He caught Victoria's eye and she nodded toward the piano. He walked over slowly, like he was approaching something sacred. The guests barely noticed him. Why would they? He was just the helps kid. Diego sat down at the piano bench and took a deep breath. His hands hovered over the keys for a moment. Victoria was about to motion for him to start when he finally began to play. The first notes were soft, gentle, nothing special. Victoria turned back to her conversation with Patricia, relieved that at least the music situation was handled. But then something changed. The melody shifted into something unexpected. It wasn't a classical piece she recognized. It wasn't jazz either. It was something else entirely. Something original. The notes flowed together in a way that made Victoria's chest tighten. She couldn't explain it. The music was sad but hopeful at the same time. It told a story without words. It was raw and honest and achingly beautiful. One by one, her guests stopped talking. Champagne glasses paused halfway to lips. Conversations died mid-sentence. Everyone turned toward the piano. Diego played with his eyes closed, completely lost in the music. His fingers moved across the keys like they were having a conversation with the instrument. There was no sheet music in front of him. This was coming from somewhere deep inside him. Victoria felt something unfamiliar stirring in her chest. Was it emotion? She couldn't remember the last time she'd felt something real at one of these parties. Everything was always so calculated, so performed. But this music was different. It was genuine. The piece built to a crescendo, filling the entire mansion with sound. It wasn't quiet background music anymore. It was demanding to be heard, demanding to be felt. And then Victoria did something she immediately regretted. As the music swelled, as her guests stood transfixed, she walked over to the piano and leaned down to Diego's ear. "Quieter," she whispered. "You're supposed to be in the background." Diego's eyes opened. For just a second, she saw something flicker across his face. Hurt, disappointment? She wasn't sure. But he nodded and adjusted his playing, softening the volume. The spell broke. Her guests slowly returned to their conversations, though several kept glancing back at the piano with confused expressions. Victoria returned to hosting, forcing herself to focus on the important people in the room, the investors, the politicians, the people who mattered. But for the rest of the evening, even as she laughed at jokes and discussed business deals, part of her attention stayed on the boy at the piano. He played quietly now, obediently like she'd asked, but something had shifted in his playing. The raw emotion was gone. He was just going through the motions. She pushed the thought away. She had more important things to worry about than hurt feelings. This was business. This was her world, and in her world, people knew their place. The dinner party was a success. Her investors were happy. Her reputation remained intact. Everything had gone according to plan. She just couldn't shake the feeling that she'd missed something important. The last guest finally left around midnight. Victoria kicked off her heels and poured herself a glass of wine. Another successful evening. Another step toward closing the deal with her investors. She'd almost forgotten about the piano situation entirely. Diego was quietly packing up his things near the piano when Victoria remembered she needed to pay him. She walked over, pulling a $50 bill from her purse. "Here you go," she said, holding out the money. "Thank you for filling in tonight." Diego took the money with a quiet "Thank you, ma'am," and turned to leave. "Diego, wait." He turned back, and Victoria saw hope flash across his face. Maybe he thought she was going to say something about his music, compliment his playing. "Next time, remember what I said about keeping it in the background. You started getting too loud at one point." The hope in his eyes died. "Yes, ma'am. I understand." He left, and Victoria thought nothing more of it. She had emails to answer, deals to finalize. The boy had done his job. That was the end of it. What Victoria didn't see was the man waiting by his car in the driveway. His name was Leonard Chen, and he was one of the most respected music producers in the country. He'd worked with symphony orchestras, discovered multiple Grammy winners, and had an ear for talent that was almost legendary in the industry. He'd been one of Victoria's dinner guests, invited because his wife was a major investor in Victoria's company. He'd spent the whole evening distracted, barely touching his food, his mind completely consumed by what he'd heard. "Excuse me," Leonard called out as Diego walked toward the staff parking area. "Can I talk to you for a moment?" Diego stopped, confused. Guests never talked to him. He barely existed to them. "You're playing tonight," Leonard said, walking closer. "That piece you played. Where did you learn it?" Diego shifted his backpack nervously. "I wrote it, sir." "It's mine." Leonard's eyes widened. "You composed that? How long have you been studying music composition?" "I haven't studied it. Not formally. I hear music in my head sometimes and I try to play it." "Who's your piano teacher?" Diego looked down at his worn sneakers. "I don't have one. I learned from watching videos online, YouTube mostly, and I practice on the old piano in the staff quarters when my mom is working." Leonard felt like he'd been hit by a truck. In 30 years of working in music, he'd never heard raw talent like this. And it was coming from a kid who learned from YouTube videos on a phone. "That piano you played on tonight," Leonard said carefully. "How often do you get to practice on an instrument like that?" "Never. That was my first time. The piano we have is missing some keys and most of the others are out of tune. But it's better than nothing." Leonard pulled out his business card and pressed it into Diego's hand. "I want you to call me. I work with young musicians. I can help you." Diego stared at the card like it might disappear. "I don't understand. Why would you want to help me?" "Because you're extraordinary. And talent like yours shouldn't be wasted." Diego's hands were shaking as he took the card. "Thank you, sir." "Thank you so much." Leonard drove home that night unable to think about anything else. But the next morning, reality hit him hard. He was scheduled to go on tour with one of his artists. 3 months in Europe, then 2 months in Asia. He'd be unreachable most of the time. He made a note to call Diego when he got back. Surely 3 months wouldn't make a difference. The kid had waited this long. He could wait a little longer. Meanwhile, Diego couldn't stop looking at the business card. He tried calling the number the next day but got voicemail. He left a message. Then another one a week later. Then another. Leonard's assistant listened to the messages but didn't think much of them. Her boss got calls from aspiring musicians every single day. She filed them away in a folder labeled General Inquiries and forgot about them. Life went back to normal for Diego. School during the day, homework in the evening, and whatever time he could steal to practice on the broken piano. His mother, Rosa, still worked long hours at the Ashford estate, coming home exhausted every night. Diego saw Victoria around the house sometimes when he came to pick up his mother. She never acknowledged him, never asked about his music. To her, he was just part of the background, like the furniture or the paintings on the walls. One afternoon, Diego was helping his mother clean the main hall when Victoria walked past them talking on her phone. She was laughing about something, closing another business deal probably. She glanced at them for half a second, then kept walking. Rosa noticed her son's expression. "What's wrong, mijo?" "Nothing, Mama, I just thought—" "Never mind, thought what?" Diego hesitated. "I thought maybe Mrs. Ashford might have said something. About the music. About that night." Rosa put down her cleaning supplies and looked at her son. "Baby, Mrs. Ashford has a lot on her mind. Important things. Business things. She probably doesn't even remember you played that night. But I played my heart out, Mama. I played the best I've ever played in my life. And she told me I was too loud." Rosa pulled her son into a hug. "I know, but that's how people like her are. They don't see us. We're invisible to them. That's just the way the world works. It shouldn't be that way. No, it shouldn't, but it is." 3 months passed. Diego kept calling Leonard's number, but never got through. He started to think maybe it had all been a dream. Maybe the card was fake. Maybe it was just some rich guy's idea of a joke. School was getting harder too. His grades were slipping because he couldn't focus. All he could think about was music. He'd write melodies on the margins of his math homework. He'd tap out rhythms on his desk during history class. His teachers started calling him distracted, unmotivated, but how could he explain to them what music meant to him? How could he make them understand that when he sat at a piano, he felt like he could finally breathe, like he finally made sense? At home, money was getting tighter. Rosa's car broke down and the repair cost almost wiped out their savings. Diego started looking for a part-time job to help out, but it meant less time for practice. Less time for the only thing that made him feel alive. One evening, he sat at the broken piano in their small apartment and tried to play. But his fingers felt heavy. The notes sounded wrong. Or maybe he just couldn't hear the music in his head anymore. His mother found him there an hour later, sitting in silence, not playing at all. "What happened?" she asked. "I don't know, Mama. Maybe I was kidding myself. Maybe I'm not special. Maybe Mrs. Ashford was right to tell me to stay quiet, to stay in the background where I belong." Rosa sat down next to her son. "Listen to me. You are special. I've known that since you were 5 years old and you taught yourself to play Twinkle Twinkle Little Star on that toy keyboard. You have a gift. Then why doesn't anyone care? Why doesn't anyone see it?" "I don't know, baby." "I don't know." They sat there together in the darkness, the broken piano silent between them, neither of them knowing that everything was about to change in ways they couldn't possibly imagine. Because while Diego was losing hope, his best friend Carlos was about to do something that would change his life forever, something that would make it impossible for the world to ignore him any longer. Sometimes the people who believe in us the most are the ones who refuse to let our light stay hidden, even when we've given up on ourselves. Carlos had been Diego's best friend since elementary school. They'd grown up in the same neighborhood, played soccer in the same dusty lot, and shared dreams that seemed impossible for kids like them. Carlos knew about Diego's music better than anyone. He'd listened to him practice on that broken piano 1,000 times, watched him pour his soul into every note, and Carlos had been there the night Diego came home from the Ashford estate, eyes shining with hope about the music producer's business card. He'd also watched that hope slowly die over the past 3 months. One Tuesday afternoon, Carlos came over to find Diego staring at a college application on his laptop. Not for music school, for a regular state college where he could study something practical, something that would get him a steady job. "What are you doing?" Carlos asked. Diego didn't look up. "Being realistic. My mom works herself to death just to keep us afloat. I need to help her, not chase some fantasy. Playing music isn't a fantasy. You're incredible. Nobody cares how incredible I am. Nobody even knows I exist." Carlos felt something snap inside him. He couldn't watch his best friend give up like this. Not when he had so much talent. Not when the world needed to hear what Diego could do. "I'll be right back," Carlos said suddenly. "Where are you going?" "Just trust me." Carlos lived 3 blocks away. He ran home, grabbed his phone, and ran back to Diego's apartment. Diego was taking a break from the college application, sitting at the old piano, playing quietly. "Keep playing," Carlos said, holding up his phone. "Don't stop. What are you doing?" "Just play. Play that piece you wrote, the one from the dinner party." Diego was too tired to argue. He started playing, letting his fingers find the familiar melody. Carlos recorded everything, staying quiet, capturing not just the music but the surroundings. The broken piano, the cramped apartment, the peeling paint on the walls, the reality of where this beautiful music was coming from. When Diego finished, Carlos had tears in his eyes. "That was perfect," he said. "What are you going to do with that video?" Carlos grinned. "You'll see." That night, after Diego went to sleep, Carlos edited the video on his phone. He added simple text at the beginning. "This is my best friend Diego. His mom cleans houses for rich people. He learned piano from YouTube. This is him playing a song he wrote. The world needs to hear this." At the end he added, "The billionaire whose house his mom cleans heard him play once. She told him to be quieter, to stay in the background. But some people are meant to be heard." Carlos posted the video on every social media platform he could find. Then he went to sleep, not expecting much. Maybe a few dozen people would watch it. Maybe it would make Diego feel a little better to know someone believed in him. He woke up to his phone exploding with notifications. The video had been shared 2,000 times overnight. By morning, it was 20,000. By noon, it had hit 1 million views. Comments poured in from around the world. "This kid is unbelievable. I've been playing piano for 30 years and I've never heard anything like this. Someone get this boy to Juilliard immediately." "Wait, did he say a billionaire told him to be quiet? Who is she?" That last comment started a chain reaction. People dug into the story. They figured out Diego's last name from his school social media accounts. They found out where his mother worked. They discovered Victoria Ashford's name, and then the story exploded into something much bigger. News outlets picked it up. Hidden genius playing on broken. Piano goes viral. Billionaire's housekeeper's son has incredible musical talent. Rich woman ignored prodigy playing in her own home. Diego woke up to Carlos banging on his door, phone in hand, talking so fast he could barely understand him. "Dude, you have to see this. The video. It's everywhere. Everyone's talking about you." Diego watched the view counter climb in real time. 2 million. 3 million. His hand started shaking. This wasn't real. This couldn't be happening. His mother came out of her bedroom, confused by the commotion. When they showed her the video, she went pale. "Oh no," she whispered. "Oh no, no, no. Mama, what's wrong? This is good news, right?" Rosa sat down heavily on their worn couch. "Mrs. Ashford, she's going to see this. Everyone's going to see this. She was right." By that afternoon, news vans were parked outside the Ashford estate. Reporters were calling it the story of the year. Tone-deaf billionaire ignores musical genius right under her nose. Victoria was in a business meeting when her assistant interrupted. Tablet in hand, face white as paper. "Mrs. Ashford, you need to see this now." Victoria watched the video, her expression unreadable. Then she read the comments. Then she saw the news headlines. Her jaw tightened with each word. "Get my PR team in here immediately," she snapped. But it was too late for damage control. The story had taken on a life of its own. People weren't just celebrating Diego's talent. They were angry at Victoria. Comments called her heartless, out of touch, a symbol of everything wrong with wealthy people who couldn't see the humanity in the people who served them. Her company's social media accounts were flooded with angry messages. Protesters started gathering outside her. Corporate headquarters with signs saying, "Listen, to the people you ignore," and "Talent doesn't have a price tag." Victoria's stock in her own company dipped, for the first time in 5 years. That evening, Victoria called Rosa into her office. Rosa walked in terrified, knowing her job was probably over, knowing that her son's moment of hope might cost them everything. Victoria stood by the window looking out at the news vans below. She didn't turn around when Rosa entered. "Did you know about this?" Victoria asked, her voice cold. "No, ma'am." Diego didn't know either. It was his friend. He was just trying to help. "Help? This is a disaster. Do you have any idea how this makes me look?" Rosa's fear suddenly mixed with something else. Something she'd kept buried for 15 years of cleaning this woman's house, washing her sheets, cooking her meals, and being treated like furniture. "With all respect, Mrs. Ashford, maybe that's the problem. You're worried about how it makes you look, not about how it made my son feel when you told him to be quiet. Not about what it means that he has this gift and nobody cared until strangers on the internet showed them." Victoria turned around, surprised. Rosa had never spoken to her like this. "I work 2 jobs to keep food on our table," Rosa continued, her voice shaking but steady. "My son taught himself to play piano on a broken instrument with missing keys. He poured his heart out for you and your guests, and you treated him like background noise. The internet isn't wrong about you, Mrs. Ashford. They're just saying what people like me are too afraid to say because we need our jobs." The room went silent. Victoria's face was unreadable. "You're fired," Victoria said quietly. "Pack your things and leave." Rosa felt her world collapse, but she lifted her chin. "Yes, ma'am." She turned to leave, tears starting to fall. Her son was going viral for his talent, and she'd just lost their only stable income. How would they survive? How would they pay rent? "Rosa, wait." Rosa turned back. Victoria was still standing by the window, but something in her posture had changed. She looked tired suddenly. Older. Almost human. "I'm sorry," Victoria said, and the words sounded strange coming from her mouth, like she wasn't used to saying them. "You're right. About all of it. And I don't know how to fix this." Rosa didn't know what to say. In 15 years, she'd never heard Victoria Ashford apologize for anything. "Can I ask you something?" Victoria said. "That night at the dinner party, when your son played, was that really the first time he'd played on a real piano?" "Yes, ma'am." Victoria closed her eyes. "And I told him to be quieter." "Yes, ma'am." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Outside, the news vans waited. Inside, 2 women from completely different worlds stood in the same room, finally seeing each other as human beings for the first time. Victoria didn't fire Rosa that day. Instead, she did something she hadn't done in years. She sent everyone else home, canceled her evening meetings, and sat down at her kitchen table. Not the formal dining room where she entertained guests. The actual kitchen where Rosa had worked for 15 years. "Sit," Victoria said, gesturing to the chair across from her. Rosa sat cautiously, still expecting the worst. "Tell me about your son," Victoria said. "Really tell me. Not just about the music. About him." Rosa didn't understand what was happening, but she started talking. She told Victoria about Diego as a little boy, how he used to hum melodies before he could even speak in full sentences, how he'd saved up birthday money for 3 years to buy that broken piano at a garage sale, how he practiced until his fingers bled, then bandaged them and kept practicing. She told her about the nights Diego cried because he couldn't afford to apply to music schools, about how he'd given up on his dreams to try to help support their family, about the light that had been slowly dying in his eyes over the past few months. Victoria listened without interrupting. Really listened. When Rosa finished, Victoria was quiet for a long time. I built an empire, Victoria finally said. I started with nothing and created something worth billions. I thought that made me smart. That made me successful. But I couldn't see talent when it was playing music 10 feet away from me. She stood up and walked to the window. The news vans were still out there waiting for her response. My PR team wants me to do a press conference tomorrow, Victoria said. They've written a whole speech. I'm supposed to announce a scholarship fund. Take credit for discovering your son. Turn this whole mess into good publicity. Rosa's heart sank. Of course, this was just another business move, but that would be a lie, Victoria continued. I didn't discover Diego, I ignored him. And I'm tired of lying. She turned back to Rosa. I don't know if I can fix what I broke, but I want to try. Not for the cameras. Not for my reputation, just because it's the right thing to do. The next morning, Diego woke up to his phone buzzing nonstop. Millions more views overnight. Music schools reaching out. Record labels wanting to talk. It was overwhelming. But it was the direct message from Leonard Chen that made his hands shake. Diego, I am so sorry I didn't call you back. I was on tour and my assistant didn't forward your messages. I just saw your video. You're even more incredible than I remembered. Call me immediately. We need to talk about your future. Diego showed his mother, tears streaming down his face. He remembered me, Mama. He actually remembered. Within hours, Leonard had flown back to meet with them. He sat in their small living room looking at the broken piano and shook his head in disbelief. You created that music on this? He asked. It's all I had, Diego said simply. Leonard pulled out a folder of documents. I want to offer you a full scholarship to the Manhattan Conservatory of Music, one of the best in the world. I'll personally mentor you, no strings attached, just pure focus on developing your gift. Diego couldn't breathe. This was everything he'd ever dreamed of, everything he'd given up hoping for. But, Diego said slowly, my mom, she needs me here. If I go to New York, who's going to help her? Rosa grabbed her son's hand. You're going. I'll figure it out. Mama, you can't work 2 jobs forever. I can't leave you struggling while I'm off living some dream. It's not a dream if you've earned it, Rosa said firmly. And you've earned this. Leonard watched the exchange and understood. What if your mother came with you? I can help arrange that too. Diego looked at his mother with hope, but Rosa shook her head sadly. I can't leave my job. We need the income. And Mrs. Ashford, she depends on me. That's when Victoria appeared in their doorway. Rosa hadn't even heard her knock. Actually, Victoria said, stepping inside, you don't need this job anymore. Everyone stared at her. Victoria looked uncomfortable, like she was about to do something completely foreign to her nature. I'm raising your salary, significantly, and you're not a housekeeper anymore. I need someone to oversee all my household operations, manage the other staff. It's a real management position. Rosa stood up slowly. Mrs. Ashford, I don't understand. I'm also setting up a housing stipend. You'll be able to afford a better place for you and your son, and if Diego needs to go to New York for school, we'll work out a flexible schedule. You can work remotely part of the time. Leonard raised his eyebrows, impressed. Diego looked between his mother and Victoria, trying to understand what was happening. Why? Diego asked. Why are you doing this now? Victoria met his eyes. Because I should have done it 3 months ago. Because your mother has worked for me for 15 years and I never once asked her about her life. Because you played the most beautiful music I've heard in decades and I told you to be quiet. She paused. I can't change what I did, but I can try to do better. Diego wanted to feel grateful, but anger bubbled up instead. You're only doing this because the video went viral. Because it makes you look bad. If nobody had noticed, you'd still be treating us like we're invisible. Victoria flinched, but she didn't deny it. You're probably right. I wish I could say I'd have done this anyway, but honestly, I don't know. The video forced me to see what I should have seen all along. That's not good enough, Diego said, his voice shaking. You don't get to feel good about yourself just because you got caught being cruel. Diego, Rosa warned, but Victoria held up her hand. He's right. He has every right to be angry. Victoria looked at Diego directly. I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I'm not even asking you to like me. I'm just trying to do something good, even if my reasons for doing it aren't pure. The room went silent. Leonard cleared his throat. Perhaps we should focus on Diego's future right now. We can sort out the complicated feelings later, but Victoria wasn't done. There's something else. I want to start a foundation. For kids like Diego. Talented young people from working families who can't afford training or instruments or opportunities. I want to find them before they give up, before the world ignores them into silence. She pulled out papers from her briefcase. I've already drafted the documents. Leonard, I'd like you to help run it. Find the kids. Give them what they need. Not scholarships with my name plastered all over them. Real support. The kind Diego should have had from the beginning. Diego stared at the papers. It all sounded perfect. Too perfect. And what do you get out of this? Maybe a chance to sleep at night without seeing your face when I told you to play quieter, Victoria said quietly. Maybe a chance to be the person I thought I was before I realized what I'd become. Leonard looked at Diego. It's your call, kid. You don't owe her anything. But this foundation could help a lot of young musicians who are exactly where you were a week ago. Diego thought about all the kids out there right now, practicing on broken pianos, teaching themselves from free videos, dreaming impossible dreams. Kids whose talent nobody would ever notice because they weren't born in the right zip code. Okay, Diego said finally, but I have conditions. My mom gets everything in writing. The job, the salary, the housing. And the foundation doesn't use my story to make you look good. It's about helping other kids, not fixing your reputation. Victoria nodded. Agreed. Anything else? Yeah, Diego said. I want to be involved in the foundation, helping choose who gets support, making sure kids actually get what they need, not just what looks good in a press release. Done. They shook hands, though neither of them smiled. This wasn't a happy ending. It was just a beginning. A complicated, messy, imperfect beginning. That night, Victoria did something she hadn't done in over a decade. She went to her music room and found the old recordings from the dinner party. She listened to Diego's playing again. Really listened this time, without thinking about business or reputation or what other people thought. And for the first time, she understood what she'd almost destroyed. Not just a boy's dream, something rare and precious that the world desperately needed. Beauty, truth. The kind of raw emotion that reminded people they were human. She cried that night, real tears, not for her reputation or her company or her public image, but for all the years she'd spent being successful and forgetting to be human. 6 months later, Diego stood backstage at Carnegie Hall, his hands shaking so badly he could barely button his shirt. This was it, his first major public performance. Everything he'd worked for his entire life had led to this moment. His mother appeared in the doorway looking elegant in a dress Victoria had insisted on buying her. Rosa had tried to refuse, but Victoria had simply left it on her desk with a note that said, "It's just a dress, please." "How are you feeling, mijo?" Rosa asked, adjusting his collar. Terrified. What if I mess up? What if everyone's watching because of the viral video and I disappoint them? Then you disappoint them, Rosa said simply. But you won't, because you're not playing for them. You're playing for you, like you always have. There was a knock on the door. Leonard poked his head in. 5 minutes, Diego, the house is packed. Are you ready? Diego nodded, not trusting his voice. The conservatory had been everything Leonard promised and more. Real teachers who understood music theory, practice rooms with perfect pianos, other students who were just as obsessed with music as he was. For the first time in his life, Diego didn't feel like a freak for caring so much about something most people didn't understand. But it hadn't all been easy. Some students resented his viral fame. They'd worked just as hard, they said, but nobody made videos about them. Diego understood their frustration. He'd gotten opportunities because of social media, not just because of his talent. That guilt weighed on him. That's why the foundation mattered so much. In 6 months, Victoria's foundation had already helped 12 young musicians from low-income families. Real help. Instruments, lessons, application fees, even housing assistance for families who needed it. Diego had helped interview every single candidate. Victoria herself had stayed mostly in the background, just like Diego had demanded. She funded everything and helped with logistics, but she never tried to take credit. No press conferences. No speeches about how generous she was. Just quiet work that actually made a difference. Diego still wasn't sure how he felt about her. They'd had a few awkward conversations over the months. She'd asked him about his studies, actually listened to his answers. She'd shown up to one of his practice recitals at the conservatory and sat in the back, leaving before he could talk to her afterward. It was strange. She was trying, really trying, But there was still this wall between them, built from months of being invisible, from that moment when she'd told him to be quiet when all he wanted was to be heard. Now, walking toward the stage at Carnegie Hall, Diego wondered if she'd even come tonight. He hadn't invited her specifically. The tickets had gone to his family, his teachers, Leonard, and some of the kids from the foundation. The stage manager gave him the signal. Diego walked out to blinding lights and thunderous applause. The audience was huge, thousands of people. He could barely make out faces beyond the first few rows. He sat at the piano, the same kind of beautiful Steinway he'd played that night at Victoria's dinner party. But this time was different. This time nobody was going to tell him to be quiet. Diego closed his eyes and let his fingers find the keys. He started with the piece he'd written in his small apartment, the one Carlos had recorded. The one that had changed everything, but it sounded different now. Richer, more complex. He'd grown as a musician, learned new techniques, new ways to express what he felt. The melody was the same, but it had depth now. It had experience. The audience was completely silent, hanging on every note. Diego poured everything into the music. All the years of practicing on a broken piano, all the nights his mother came home exhausted from working 2 jobs, all the times he'd felt invisible, like his dreams didn't matter because of where he came from, all the anger at being dismissed, and yes, even the gratitude for second chances, for people who believed in him when he'd stopped believing in himself. The piece built to its crescendo, filling the entire hall with sound. This time nobody told him to be quieter. This time the music demanded to be heard and everyone listened. When he played the final note, there was a moment of perfect silence. Then the entire hall erupted. People stood clapping, shouting. Some were crying. Diego opened his eyes, overwhelmed. He stood and bowed, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might explode. That's when he saw her. Victoria was sitting in the very last row of the hall, almost hidden in the shadows. She wasn't standing like everyone else. She was just sitting there, tears streaming down her face, not even trying to wipe them away. Their eyes met across the distance. Diego didn't smile. Neither did she. They just looked at each other for a long moment. 2 people who'd hurt each other and been hurt, who were trying to figure out what came next. After the performance, there was a small reception. Music critics wanted to talk to Diego. Other musicians wanted to meet him. It was overwhelming in the best possible way. His mother hugged him so tight he could barely breathe. "Your father would have been so proud," she whispered. Diego's dad had died when he was young, but he'd always encouraged Diego's music. Leonard was beaming like a proud parent. "You were extraordinary. I've already had 3 calls from people wanting to book you for other performances." Carlos was there too, still amazed that his simple video had led to all this. "Dude, you killed it," he said, pulling Diego into a hug. Diego looked around for Victoria but didn't see her. She'd probably left. He felt a strange mix of relief and disappointment. But later, when most people had gone home, he found an envelope on the piano bench. Inside was a note in Victoria's handwriting. "Diego, I listened tonight. Really listened. Not as background music, not as something to control or dismiss, just as what it was, extraordinary. You were right to be angry with me. You were right about everything. I don't deserve your forgiveness, and I'm not asking for it. But I want you to know that helping create the foundation, finding other young people like you, has been the most meaningful thing I've done in 20 years of business success. You reminded me that people matter more than profits. That seeing people, really seeing them, is more important than any deal I could ever close. Thank you for that gift, even though you didn't mean to give it to me. I hope your music takes you everywhere you've dreamed of going. You've earned every bit of it. The world is lucky to hear you. I'm sorry it took me so long to listen. Victoria." Diego read the note twice. Then he folded it carefully and put it in his pocket. He found his mother helping clean up empty glasses, old habits dying hard. "Mama, leave that. You don't work here," Rosa smiled. "I know, but it feels weird to just stand around." They walked out of Carnegie Hall together into the cool night air. The city was alive with lights and sounds and possibility. "What are you thinking about?" Rosa asked. "About how strange life is," Diego said. 6 months ago, I was ready to give up on music. Ready to just accept that dreams weren't for people like us. And now? Now I know that's not true. Dreams are for everyone. Some people just have to fight harder to be heard." Rosa put her arm around her son. And some people are worth hearing. They walked toward the subway, just another mother and son in the city, except that tonight, the son had played Carnegie Hall and the world had listened. Behind them, Victoria sat in her car watching them go. She could have offered them a ride, could have tried to insert herself into their celebration. But she didn't. Some moments weren't about her. Some moments belonged to other people, and the kindest thing she could do was let them have it. She'd spent her whole life trying to be at the center of everything. Maybe it was time to learn how to step back. How to support without controlling. How to help without taking credit. It wouldn't fix what she'd done. It wouldn't erase telling a brilliant young man to be quiet when he deserved to be celebrated, but it was a start, and sometimes a start is all we get. What matters is what we do with it. Victoria drove home that night and went straight to her music room. She sat at her own piano, the one that had sat silent and decorative for so many years. She placed her fingers on the keys, hesitant. She hadn't played in over 20 years. Not since she'd been young and hungry and dreaming of success. Before she'd forgotten that success without humanity was just emptiness dressed up in expensive clothes. The notes came out rusty and imperfect. But she kept playing anyway, because maybe it wasn't too late to remember what it felt like to create something beautiful. Maybe it wasn't too late to be human again. Outside her window, the city lights twinkled like stars. And somewhere out there, a young man who'd taught himself piano on a broken instrument was living his dream. Not because someone powerful had handed it to him, but because he'd never stopped believing his music mattered, even when the world told him to be quiet. That was the real story. Not about a billionaire learning a lesson, but about a young man who refused to let anyone silence his gift. And in refusing to be silenced, he'd changed more lives than he could possibly know.